little bit of idea before I start the session. Okay, who am I? Myself, Ajay. I am one of the co-founder of DLT Labs. Today, we are going to study about very basics of blockchain. So it will be very much helpful for the people who are who have started to understand blockchain or non-blockchain. This session is not for people who are already hands-on on blockchain. There will be various other sessions within this series where it will be helpful to you. But this particular session is very much specific to very basics and nitty-gritties of the technology. This session is organized by DLT Labs. The session is part of Center of Excellence Initiative, Blockchain Center of Excellence Initiative from DLT Labs, which is what is a Center of Excellence. Those who already are part of COEs or would have attended the last session would be able to know or would be understanding. For new guys, the Center of Excellence of Blockchain is an initiative by DLT Labs to evangelize blockchain technology into the upcoming academics, people who are trying to do research about blockchain, also promote open source contribution in blockchain. We run two kind of chapters within COEs. One is called College Affiliate. A lot of people here would be joining from College Affiliate chapter. People would have been joining here from DLT Labs Affiliate chapter. Mac, it will be also one more question that would be helpful where we can get to know about who is from which particular college. So if you can just quickly run through which is the college has shown the presence today. What does DLT Labs do? DLT Labs is a global leader in development and deployment of enterprise solutions using distributed ledger technology. We have done one of the biggest enterprise blockchain network deployment for Walmart Canada. We have offices in Toronto, India, and Japan. If you want to know more about us, feel free to go at dltlabs.com and explore about us. So, Mac, if the first question can be bring up to the screen, then probably it will give me a better sense to start the session. Thanks, Adesh. I had visited Kite. I do not know whether I was able to meet you or not, but I did visit Kite 2-3 weeks back, and it was a very interesting session there. It was great to see enthusiasm from KIT people. Anubhav, these were already taken as a part of question when introduction of COE was done. But yeah, we will be. So I want today's session to be specific on about blockchain and questions around it. As part of COEs, there are already a lot of things which are being told to your SPOC faculty within your college. So if you can just reach out to him, you will be able to get a lot of details. I will take these questions later. Whoever want to know about the scope and blockchain domain, probably it can be taken at a later stage. There is a questionnaire or poll in front of your screen. Please go ahead and fill that questionnaire so that we get to know what is the crowd we have and how to take the session forward. Can we get the results of the poll, Mac, in next 2 minutes?
Yeah, so out of 137 people, 128 people answered. So I'm just expecting the rest of all of them.
Okay, so let's give the statistics because we are already late, right? So I think we have good amount of statistics with that particular group.
Great. Yeah, I'm just sharing the results with you. So we have 90% of the beginners. Out of the 130 people, 117 people are beginners, and intermediate range is just 12 people. Whole of the 9%. Only 1% are people from the expertise, like they're the experts in the blockchain field.
Okay, cool. So great to see a lot of beginners joining in, and this session is specifically for beginners. So whenever we talk about any new technology, right, what is the very underlying principle to understand a new technology is what was the motivation behind it, why it was introduced, what are the challenges with which this new technology is solving, or what are the new challenges which this new technology is bringing, and what are the key ingredients which are responsible for making the technology awesome, or how it is and what it is. Right. So we will start to delve into the motivation, challenges, and key ingredients. Mac, in meantime, also if you can send out one poll for colleges, right? Which colleges are there?
Yeah, sure, I'll do that.
So it is probably a lot of would have, for beginners also would have joined this session, would have already heard about Bitcoin, right? What is Bitcoin? Probably maximum of you guys would be knowing. But if you talk about blockchain technology, so there are a lot of precursors to it. There are a lot of ways in which, or there are a lot of paths which can be retraced back. But the pivotal point in the history was related to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was that pivotal motivation, or Bitcoin was that pivotal first use case which made the technology popular. So the first blockchain was Bitcoin. It was published in 2008. What was the motivation behind to actually develop Bitcoin? So if you look into the Bitcoin definitions and their white paper itself, it is a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash that would allow online payment to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. What it resulted in, something known as cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency is one of the very first use case of blockchain. So throughout the session, when we are talking about cryptocurrency, or in future when we are trying to talk about blockchain, do not try to confuse cryptocurrency and blockchain as one and the same thing. So blockchain is a big technology umbrella in which cryptocurrency is one of the use case. And how distributed ledger comes into picture, we can almost also consider the distributed ledger technology or the DLT technology by, in fact, the company, our company itself is DLT Labs, which stands for Distributed Ledger Technology, is one of the very bigger umbrella in which blockchain then cryptocurrency resides. So if you read the statement again, a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash. So what it wanted to enable is to do something in which intermediaries are not involved. Currently, everything which used to happen before Bitcoin in terms of financial world used to go through a lot of intermediaries, used to go through a lot of other parties which used to bring trust into the system. Why financial industry? One of the big thing in which trust was more required, because by default it leads to cash, it leads to a direct value realization. So that is where a lot of middlemen, a lot of trusted parties are involved, a lot of regulatory bodies are involved throughout the process when somebody pays from money from one person to another or from one institution to another. So the whole underlying idea of Bitcoin was to be that peer-to-peer version of electronic cash that would allow payment to be sent directly from one party to another without going through either any intermediaries or any financial institution. So in today's world, if you remove, or if you look into any traditional way in which you do payment, right? You go to a bank, you open an account, and the other person whom you are transferring money should also have certain account in certain banks. These banks then are regulated via policies, which is regulated by RBI. What setup I'm trying to talk about is more about an Indian construct and an Indian setup, but similar type of setup is available across all the sovereign nation, throughout the countries in the world. There will be a regulatory authority, which is called generally a central bank. Then there are private or public banks which are regulated via policies which comes from that particular central bank. And in order to, you want to do any kind of financial transaction, somehow the other way you should be having an account with the bank, you should be associated with a bank. Otherwise, it is not possible. That's what the technology wanted to disrupt. why it wanted to disrupt. So we'll giving you a little bit more background. So Bitcoin was, who is the inventor of Bitcoin? Who invented Bitcoin? It is something which is still a very big mystery, a very well hidden secret of the world. But the person goes by a pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto, and nobody knows whether it's a person or it's a group of person. There is a lot of speculation. I will say, if nobody has read about it, it is a very good Sunday read for you guys. Try to Google about him, try to read about him. There was recently a lot of controversies also going around one person who was proclaiming himself to be a Satoshi Nakamoto. There was a case in US court around certain claims around it. I will say it will be a very good read for you guys over the weekend. And feel free to answer the poll which is there in front of you so that we can get a better hang of the participant. My screen is still visible, Matt, right?
Yes, Ajay, that is.
Okay.
It's not just a question to me. Anyone who is, I mean, if the Ajay screen is visible, just give a thumbs up so that, he also been aware of what is happening. So there is a reactions board. Anyone can just interact with the reactions. And
Yeah, Prashant, I think MMUT is still not officially onboarded as a COE partner. Geetam is already there. I think Mac Geetam is there.
Yeah, Geetam,
not still an official COE partner. We are in talks with them. But no worries, you have joined. There is no issues about
there
it.
are already 6 people from Geetam, so who said like they joined from Geetam. Okay, I just got half the responses, Ajay. 75 responses.
Okay, can you just bring it up, those?
Sure. Do you see the answers?
Okay, we have DLT Labs future employee also. Guys, welcome everybody. I do not know how many would have interacted with me during the interview process, but great to have you here. Probably will give you good hands-on about the technology before you guys join in. So, okay, we 79 people had voted. It's okay. So it becomes very much relevant when we talk about blockchain to actually first understand a little bit about cryptocurrency, because that's where, since I told you, right, that was the original motivation from where everything started and everything took a lead. So it is very essential that you understand cryptocurrency from point of technical aspect, because it will give you better hands on understanding the blockchain technology. I will also talk about what different kinds of ways enterprise are trying to use blockchain technology, but it will give you a better hand of understanding little bit few underlying principles around blockchain technology, and you will be able to better realize it, that why it is a game changer. So little bit on a side note, like why Satoshi came up with peer-to-peer, okay, but why peer-to-peer, and what was the reason behind it, and what was the other motivation behind it, that somebody needs to have such thing in order to finances to do? Because in day-to-day life, you will not think about it, that what is problem with my bank, what is broken, why even I need to have such things in place. So what Bitcoin was trying to do was not trying to create just an representation of existing currency like a US dollar. Bitcoin wanted to do something that in itself will be viewed as a value store, or a way in which value transfer may happen. Bitcoin was not launched with an assumption or with an motivation that in future it will be pegged against USD and it will be treated as one of a way of carrying USD from one exchange to another exchange. It was moreover a way of a medium of exchange or a store of values for the people who are onboarding in that particular ecosystem. It had a very beautiful construct and a concept about how to bring in that particular trust in the system, right? Because if you think about how it can happen that we remove a central bank and still everything can happen seamlessly, right? Without any policy people, without any regulators. If you do not know about these Bitcoin things, how it is happening, it will look like it's a magical world. That how it can happen actually, that there is nobody to govern, there is nobody to regulate, there is nobody central authority looking forward that somebody can do wrong or something can go wrong. Then how these all things can work? So that is what are the underlying principles of blockchain. So to give you or talk about more generic part, so try to understand in this particular fashion that whatever we do in current world, let's say irrespective of doing finances, everything is a transaction. Even when I go and click a button on my keypad, which prints a character on my Word document or whatever editor I'm having, that is also a transaction. Me talking to you, conveying something is also a part of transaction. Why it's a transaction? Because there are parties involved, there are stakeholders involved, and then there is transfer of something, which is emanating from me or which is emanating from one of the any other stakeholders in that particular ecosystem, and it is reaching to some place. And these things are deterministic in nature. So when we talk about me pressing a button and on a keyboard and that getting printed on an editor, it is something which is deterministic in nature. I press C, I will get C. There are certain algorithms to it, there are certain business logic to it, as well as there are certain technical ways it happens, but it is a deterministic thing that will happen, and that determinism is brought about via a piece of a code, right? Which comes with an underlying principle that in a given state, for a given input, we will get a fixed output. Correct? So try to understand if everything in this particular world is a transaction, right? Whatever we do, wherever we require more trust, in order to bring that trust, third parties are required. Why they are required? Because at a very core, all these transactions, whatever we are doing, or all these information sharing, whatever we are will lead to transfer of data, right? Which in turn goes into concept of information. Information is derived from the underlying data. And all these data at an underlying core principle are distributed in nature. So if these data are distributed in nature, it brings in certain problem statements which requires trust to be there. And what those problem statements are: transparency, privacy, data integrity, auditability. For a banking institution, why you trust a bank? You trust a bank that it provides you a degree of transparency with a degree of privacy. It provides you integrity, that if you have transferred a money, correct, if you have done a transaction, they take an onus of it that it will materialize. It provides you a degree of auditability, as well as it provides a degree of auditability to all the policy makers and governing bodies. So if you look into very aspect of it, if you have to replace something like that, right, if you have to replace people or bodies which are bringing in trust, you will require to solve problems which are cornerstone to a distributed data. So you will require to solve problem, how I can bring in transparency without a centralized party? How can I bring a privacy in place without a centralized party? How can I bring in integrity and auditability without a third party, without a trusted authority there? How to bring those things within the system? And that's what blockchain does beautifully. So blockchain is in fact not a single technology, but it is an amalgamation of technology. It is not one technology thing that, okay, this is what blockchain is. In order to bring about blockchain, there were various technology elements which were brought in together to actually realize what and how currently blockchains look like. Okay, and we will look into these component in great detail in few things in session today, and some things we'll be covering in next session. So as we are talking about distributed data, right? So what we did talk about transparency, privacy, integrity, and auditability. If you talk from the perspective of currency, there are more specific examples of it. One is double spending. Other is impersonation, cooking the books, right? So these all somehow, what we were talking about generics, if you look into currency aspect or if you look into the banking aspects, those problems are also present. So double spending, it's a very peculiar problem in a lot of financial industry where you are able to spend something which you have already spent it. So let's say you are talking with two guys simultaneously, and both of them you have promised that I will give you 10 rupees or a $10, and you have only $10 in a banking account. So what double spend means, that you are able to give $10 to both of them by not having $20 in your account. You have only $10, but somehow you create a sequence of events and you evade the process in which a check is there, that which doesn't allow you to transfer these two things parallelly, right? Because if, let's say, if a parallel event gets triggered, right, in which parallelly you are paying $10 to both of them, at any point of time, since that payment has not happened, the system will say that, okay, you have $10 available to you. So there are ways in which the distributed ledger, if not treated properly, it can be gamified, or the same problem can exist with distributed data aspect, because ultimately these distributed data are managed on a ledger aspect. Why we talk a lot of in terms of ledger, it's not only because we are talking about finance, because as I told, right, everything in this world we are treating currently for the discussion point of view as transaction, and each transaction needs to be put in book so that there is a record of it. So that is why when we talk about blockchain in general, it comes under the greater ambit of distributed ledger technology, because whatever happens, not only financial transaction or anything which happens on top of blockchain gets recorded. Anything which leads to change in state, I will, in case people are not able to understand what the state is, in future sessions you will be able to understand, but just for current understanding purpose, understand that state is something which each of the person can go and look at it. So maybe, or in a very layman terms, if you talk about finances, state will be what is your current balance account. So that is one state, right? So making sure that whatever changes in the states are happening is recorded in a way which is transparent, which cannot be fudged, which cannot be cooked. And in order to do so, right, you need to come up with a technology set, you need to come up with a technology way in which it happens and these things are avoided. I see one open question. What is peer-to-peer? Okay, so peer-to-peer is one of the very cornerstone methodology when it comes to blockchain. So in a very layman, try to understand, when you currently transfer money from your bank account to another bank account, effectively what is happening, bank says that you have this much amount in your account, right? Banks take and guarantee. And when you do a transfer, few years back, it was not an immediate. Why it was not immediate? Because you send instruction to bank, okay, I want to transfer this much amount. That amounts were transferred. Now with advancement of certain process, advancement of certain procedure, it happens in real time. But it is still not happening in real time. And that is why it is not peer-to-peer. So peer-to-peer would be, okay, let me take a step back. Let's try to think in this way. Let's say I had a 10 rupee cash in my hand, right? I'm holding in my hand. So in that case, if I give that 10 rupee cash directly to you, it's direct peer-to-peer transfer. You immediately materializes that 10 rupee, it immediately reaches to you. What I have in my hand is what I own, what I hold, right? And when it is transferred to you, it is residing with you. So, and this is a very crude example. There can be a lot of discussions and subjectivity to it, that if I'm holding 10 rupees it in my hand, does it actually belong to me? But let's assume that if I'm holding it's belong to me, it's my money, and what I'm giving to you, right, it goes to you. So if it happens directly between me and you without a third party being involved, it is called peer-to-peer. When it does not happen directly and there are intermediaries involved, it is not peer-to-peer. So if you're taking login in your banking account and transferring our money from your account to another account, it looks like it is peer-to-peer, but it is not, because that transfer is not happening directly. It is a make-feel way of looking at that it is happening in real time, but it is not, and that is not peer-to-peer. So peer-to-peer is something which not only mimics, but what I have told you, that I'm having 10 rupees in cash, I'm handing it over to you. It happens with the technology in real time without any facades. So that is called peer-to-peer. Any other question? I will take a pause of 1 or 2 minutes in case anybody has any question at this particular point of time.
Someone has a question, cooking the books again. They're asking us to explain that once again.
Is it in Q&A window or it is in chat window? Right?
It's in the chat window.
Okay, cooking the books. So cooking the books is a very simple example. Let's say, okay, let's try to think in a very crude fashion, right? A lot of you would have seen the movie, right, where there are jamidars with whom a farmer goes and take a money, correct? They borrow certain money, and while borrowing, they put their thumbprint there, right? Now they would have borrowed 1,000, right? There would be a munim there in that particular movie who goes and rub that 1,000, write 10,000 there. So it is a very crude example, but similar kind of things happens in financial world, where big organization, where big banks, where big financial institutions are able to cook book because the system is not very transparent. They have authority to do so, right? There is a lot of cases with lot of, especially in India in recent past, we have seen a lot of banking institutions which are getting regulated have been found out that they have given certain loans to certain companies when it was sure that those loans cannot be recovered. So the companies whom the loan would have been given, they would have cooked their book because that is not their actual worth. That is not the worth they have. So what it allows you, if these things are not over distributed ledger, it's not transparent. It allows you to, if you have a right authority there, you can go and change anything. It allows you to go and manipulate values. And that is in a very crude manner what the book means. So impersonation is very simple, right? You did a kind of identity theft, right? You duplicated somebody's signature and you start signing checks on their behalf. Somehow you cloned certain of their digital aspect, right? And you are able to impersonate them. Somehow you are able to create fake identities which are associated as an identity which can be recognized within a financial institution. So that is what impersonation means, that you can impersonate somebody. Anybody else, any question? And guys, try to put the question in Q&A box instead of chat box. It allows us to, I will explain the state in a very much detail in further, like even today also. So do not worry about it. How is peer-to-peer as miner? We'll get into those details, Nadeem. I'm just trying to build certain base and talk very basic in very layman language. Those things will come in future. Ledger again. So Arpan, see, ledger is nothing but, let's say if you have a piece of, like you have a copy in front of you, right? It has a lot of pages, it has a lot of rows, and you start recording something in those particular rows, right? Then you turn over the page and record again something. So it is very simple. That is what ledger is. Recording things in a manner that it can be audited, it can be viewed, it can be presented as proof, is what ledger is. Adding distributed to it, what it means that ledger is not at only one place, it is distributed, it is decentralized, so that people are not able to fudge the ledger. Let's say if there was a copy in which only you are recording the data and you have full authority to tear a page, paste a new page, rub a line, write a new line, correct? It is not distributed, it is a centralized ledger. But when you attach word distributed to it, it means that particular copy which you are writing is distributed with n number of people. Everybody has access to it. Whatever is happening on it, everybody can see. If you are cooking something, everybody can take a note of it. Everybody can take a notice of it. That is what distributed ledger means. So your copy gets shared across. There are more nuances to it, but for today's session, just consider that that is what distributed ledger means. Any other question, guys? So elaborating more on distributed ledger, few things I've already spoken when I was trying to again explain distributed ledger, but there is what the central idea around distributed ledger is that so why cooking happens or why a lot of things may happen is because of the fact that there may be a lot of malicious actor or a lot of people who are trying to take advantage of the system are participants. And if those participants are able to manipulate anything, it will not be good for the system. So central idea of distributed ledger is that all non-malicious actor would maintain an identical copy. So to the person I was explaining distributed ledger, where he is having a piece of notebook in which he is recording. So the same notebook is shared across. In physical world, it was not possible, but in digital world, right, you can share the same notebook at a very crude way. Let's say a Google Doc, right? It can be shared across. It is an identical copy which is shared across, and whatever is happening there is versioned. Everybody is able to look into it. Everybody is able to see into it. But what it makes a different aspect is that each participant in this particular system, because there are no trusted authorities, now there are no central authorities which are going to make sure that whatever is there in the book or whatever is getting written in the book is true, it is not getting manipulated. The onus now starts lying on the people who are owning these distributed ledger or who are participant to make sure that non-malicious actors are not allowed to write something which is malicious in nature. Okay, so that is where blockchain or distributed ledger solve these problems. And there is a very famous saying that consensus mechanism in blockchain. So we will again talk about consensus in detail, but consensus in a very generic is allowing what can be written depending upon what majority agrees to. So since it's a distributed ledger, it will be owned by many participants, it will be owned by many people. Now, what is written on it, what gets written on it, we need to make sure that whatever is getting written and whatever is going on is correct, right? Then the people who are maintaining and participant need to act in an honest fashion. If they are not going to act in an honest fashion, again, the same problem will arise. Blockchain solves this problem about how people should act in an honest way or how honesty is rewarded is also a very beautiful concept. So somebody was mentioning miners and all this stuff. We'll come back when we will discuss how it happens beautifully in a blockchain world or in a distributed ledger world. So ultimately, it allows you, it works in such a fashion that if you are trying doing harm to the system, the other people in the system will try to kick you out. And they will not allow you to access the system. They will not allow you to write into the system. And the majority is incentivized, or majority is shown the value in such a way that it allows them or promote honesty within the system. So it is not only distributed ledger, like if we distribute ledger, the problem will be solved, but to bring in those constraints in place, to bring in those mechanism in place, that it happens seamlessly and it happens in an honest fashion. Now, for any blockchain system to work, right, there are certain key ingredients which it should have. One is there should be a network. You cannot have a distributed ledger without a network, right? Because you need distribution. It should have identities, because whoever is interacting with the system, you need to have identities. In normal world, again, coming back to example of how identities are currently managed, like you have PAN, you have Aadhaar, these all are issued by a central authority. And when impersonation happens, this is where somebody can fudge a PAN card, somebody can duplicate a PAN card, they can create a duplicate copy, though it can be verified easily, but everywhere those verification does not happen in a very easy fashion. There are still problems how the verification does happen. So similarly, an identity is required in this particular network also, which governs how people, what people have power within the network, depending upon what type of blockchain network it is, and who is initiating a transaction, who is initiating a value transfer, who is receiving a value transfer. So by default, the system should have identities. Other is data structure. So we did talk about notebook, right? So when you are writing in a notebook, you are writing in a line or a record. So what is the structure of that particular record, right? So that's what the data structure means. Blockchain rules. Rules, coming back to the notebook example, how many records can be written in a page, right? How many pages are there in the notebook? These type of things becomes the rule. Consensus is about how people are agreeing that what is right within the system. There are n number of consensus currently in blockchain. We will go deeper down into each consensus. Then there is blockchain governance. Blockchain governance. So we talked about right, that blockchain in a sense, or cryptocurrency in a sense, was brought in as a replacement to trusted party, middleman, the bodies which are regulating. So if it is run by community, doesn't mean that it does not have governance, but governance is decentralized in nature. There is not one central authority which is putting forward the rules, regulations, what can happen. So ultimately, all these blockchain is a piece of software, right? So governance happens at n number of ways and in n number of places. So what is getting written in the code, right? What particular code is published is also one of the governance. Because ultimately, this is an open source thing, specifically if you talk about cryptocurrency, it's an open source thing. Bitcoin is an open source. And whatever is written as a code, that is only get deployed across a distributed ledger. So all these also becomes part of blockchain governance in a very crude sense and in a very layman way. There are more fun nuances to governance when we start looking into enterprise blockchain space. But for now, for simplicity and for understanding, just try to understand that governance is something that what is getting written in software, what are the underlying conditions for software to work, what are those deterministic, like for one input, one deterministic output is getting produced, what is that particular piece of code? What if there is something that needs to be changed, right? How that changed are published in public, correct? So ultimately, in an open source world, these things are run via open source communities. So communities proposes something, a voting happens. So for all these, a governance group is required. But it is still, it is a decentralized where it is not a central authority which is deciding. And in case the governance does not decide, then also since it is open source, you can take it, you can change it, and you can publish in public. It is for now people to either accept it or reject it. So given in fact of all the governance aspect, it is still very much, or the degree of governance which is available is very humongous, right? There is no boundary that, okay, this is the only degree of governance which is available in an public blockchain or in an open source technology in which blockchain operates. Yeah, PPT will be shared after the webinar, and in any case, recording is getting shared. Archit Mishra, if majority harms the system, then system gets harmed, right? So there are ultimately the system is working, because system has been written to incentivize the majority in such a way that they work honestly, right? So it is same thing when if the majority will start harming themselves, they are harming themselves also. They are not gaining anything out of it. That is how it is done. So there is a very fine line between rules and governance. So governance decide what will be the rules. Okay. So rules are something which are written once a governance is decided. Okay, these are the rules which needs to be set forward, right? So got my point, right? So governance is a group of body which sits, right, in a decentralized fashion. They come to a agreement that these are the rules which our network should follow. These are the rules which should be followed by this particular blockchain entity. That is what the rules are. Governance are the bodies which are putting forward the rules. So governance is about how that body can be formed, that they can put forward the rules. Governance is about what should be the policy and what should be the process and procedure if a rules read as a change. Correct. So that is what governance and the fine line. So now we are going to take care of, or we are going to talk about each of the ingredients which we have just now discussed within the blockchain network. We will talk about these ingredients in detail, that what a network is, what identity is, how the data structures are, what are the various rules, what are the various consensus, and what are the various governance. Our target is for today to cover all of these ingredients at least. And the next session will be more about taking a blockchain example or a cryptocurrency use case, and then talk very much specific about how those particular networks are established, how the identities work in that particular blockchain, how that particular blockchain data structures are, what are the various rules and consensus and governance those blockchains are handled out. Today's we are going to cover these things in a more generic fashion and in a more general way. So starting with network, right? As I told you that in order to make sure that distributed ledger to exist, there needs to be a network. That it is distributed to whom, it is distributed how, where it is going. In earlier system, in earlier ways, when internet was not there, it was very difficult to actually have these network established. But now since internet is already there and it is in terms of how the information flows and what rapid bandwidth information and data are flowing, that is not a problem. That problem does not exist. So, but within the network, so by default, when you talk about network, which is related to computers, correct? For a network which is human, the human is somebody who is connecting. But in case the network which you are talking about is not about the humans, but about a blockchain network, which is a piece of software running in a computer or a server or a piece of computing device. So here we are all talking about, and we are trying to think about how these various computing devices are connected to each other, right? And what are the various ways, what are the various constraints these networks can be established and can be formed? What are the reasons for these networks to exist? So the central idea of distributed ledger was that there would be identical copies of transaction what is happening. There will be identical copies of the record which is there. Again, coming back to the very crude example, there is a notebook, right, in which there are a lot of pages, there are a lot of lines. So how these lines are and the pages are and this notebook is shared across all the party who want to have a look at it, who want to put an entry to it. So all these nodes is one such copy. So a node in a distributed ledger or a DLT or a blockchain network is a piece of a computing device with some storage, which is having that one copy. The next statement, which says that node also accept and broadcast proposed transaction. It is from very generic point of view. It is not applicable universally, but what it means that if a node is there, what basic it should do? It can be only called a node in the network if it's able to accept and send out information, right? Then only it will be able to maintain that particular copy. So whenever a new transactions are proposed, what effectively means whenever a new record is written, processed, right? Node should be able to communicate with each other and node should be able to pass on these information. It is not that simultaneously everywhere those information will go. So let's say if I am one of the participating identities in a blockchain network and I am having a node. So effectively, I will be changing my copy, which is local in nature. But what effectively means that when I'm changing that particular copy and I'm putting that a new transaction there, everybody within the node should be able to receive it. If they are able to receive it, then only they will be able to write it. Similarly, there are other nodes also who are trying to do similar action, similar thing. They should be also able to broadcast it to me and I should be able to receive that information so that I can update my copy. So that every copy across the network are identical in nature. And through this particular aspect animates one of the very big underlying philosophy of blockchain, which is called single source of truth. In a centralized world, if we talk about where the single source of truth exists, it exists in a centralized fashion at certain places. Let's say your truth that how much your account owns money or how much of money is there in your account is one of the truth which is currently stored by banks. Your respective bank only has that information. If the server in which those details are there, right, or the records are there or their copies are destroyed, those records are destroyed, right? It does not have that degree of distribution where anybody in the world can run a node and it has your information available on it. So if somebody runs a node or network in such a way, it is called public network, where anybody can come and spin up a server, download a piece of software, start running that software on their piece of computing device. That particular software starts communicating with all the computing device which have same piece of software, start receiving information. So whatever they have, these nodes also or these computing device and storage also have same information. So if the other devices are down, still if this devices is still running, you can get that information and you can have that single source of truth from that particular device or that particular unit. So that is the whole idea about nodes. In a public blockchain, so there can be n number of networks. Let's not even use term blockchain currently. So there can be, these network can be designed in n number of ways. One is a public network where anybody can download a piece of software. If it has a computer, they can start running it. That particular piece of software can start communicating it and start receiving and broadcasting information. This particular type of setup is called public network, where everything is public. So whatever is getting written and who can write is in a public domain. It's in a public space. Every node has same power. No node is different than another. Then there is another type of network which is called private network. What private network means that everybody, there are two ways in which the network becomes private, and at maximum time there is amalgamation of both of them. One is that you make that piece of software available privately in a licensed fashion, which cannot be shared across by anybody or it is not available public. So if you are running only you are running and you do not have permission to share with other, right? Until unless the network as a whole decides that we can be shared or not. Other aspect is that network is allowed to communicate with only given set of machines. If that software is available public also, if somebody is going to run, the network will not communicate with them because they only identify certain private players. In this particular private setup also, each node within a private network has same power. They have same authority, they have same access, they have same view. The other way of running the network, or one more way, is permissioned way. So permissioned is something which is again on top of a private network, but here each node does not have same power. Every node is not equal. So each node has its respective roles and responsibility, which they are required to perform. So that is how currently the blockchain world is divided into three kind of networks. One is a public network, private network, permission network. When we talk about use cases such as cryptocurrencies, these are public network. A cryptocurrency which is totally decentralized and totally distributed. Every cryptocurrency may not be, but in principle, a public cryptocurrency is running on a public network. The trust within a cryptocurrency emanates from the fact how much public it is and how much transparency is there. That is the reason cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, one of the very forerunner in this cryptocurrency space, are doing so good, so well, because they are running in a pure public and a decentralized fashion. Anybody, any question at this particular point of time? Anything related to node? If you have any question, please feel free to ask. There are a lot of aspects of node which we will cover later, but feel free to ask the question in case I feel that it can be answered at this particular point of time. I will answer. Otherwise, we'll take it further. So Ajay, in any case, whatever data is getting written in node, everybody will have access to those nodes, right? Or those data. So I did not get, like, what harm do you see that that anybody has access to the data before it is written in the node? If you can elaborate it. With Walmart, we have a permission network. It is for any enterprise use case, public networks or a public blockchain is not generally the blockchain of use case. So for every enterprise use case, which mainly DLT Labs deals in, we launch permission blockchain network for all of these participants. A node is a copy of transactions. A node is a copy of transaction. Correct. Node is little bit more than that. So when we talk about node, right, node has a two main component. One is a software and one is data or the storage with it. So storage stores the copy of transaction, but in order for that to happen, node should also run a piece of software, a code which has codification around blockchain rules. What is the blockchain consensus? How the transaction which is coming to them are getting validated, right? So in principle, node needs to validate, then write, correct? It is not that everything which is coming to node will write. So there is a validation process which requires node to perform. And when that validation process is completed, the node writes the transaction in a copy, and that particular copy nodes writes a transaction into the storage, and that particular storage contains the copy of all the transactions. Arpan, I could not understand your question. Can we record a new data in node instead of registering in a ledger? Ledger resides in the node. What is ledger? Ledger is set of a record, right? Where does it exist? Where does that record exist? Record exists in storage in node, correct? So ledger is, or a distributed ledger is part of the node itself. It is not separate from it. So Ajay, if node only 5 of the node data is written, it means the majority has not agreed to write that data, right? So by default, it will not be included in the ledger. So whatever gets finally included in the ledger is what majority decides. So at least 51 nodes within your network would have written that particular data. Then only it will become part of source of truth or a single source of truth. See, every node has authority to accept a transaction. Okay, it's not about accepting a transaction. Every node is accepting transaction. Every node is writing a transaction. But what finally goes in a single copy of truth, or what copy is shared across, what's matter. So since it is a public, right? So everybody can run a piece of software in their computer. Let's say you downloaded a blockchain software and start running on your piece of computer, correct? Now, since it is on a public network, it will start accepting and it will start broadcasting data. Let's say you are also one of the person who wants to write into the ledger. You want to do certain transaction, you want to write into the ledger. So what is the node nearest to you? Is the node which you are owning. So you will write that particular data onto your node. That piece of software will have an codified build in it. First, it will validate whether that piece of data which you are writing is correct or not. Is it right data or not? When I say right data, the transaction which you are trying to do is within the ambit of blockchain rules or not. Does it follow the blockchain's rules and regulation? If it follows, it will write in its copy. It will write in a local copy and let everybody know that I have written this particular thing. And I think it is right. Everybody should write it. Now, everybody, when they will receive, they will again validate it. Okay, that guy has written, but we have to validate whether it is right or not. If majority of people validate it and write it in their ledger, it becomes part of distributed ledger and it becomes part of single source of truth. In case you have written and you have sent it to other and other people have rejected, then they will tell you that we have rejected this. If you want to be still part of this particular network, this is the right thing you should write. In case you are not writing it, your copy will become different from us and ultimately it will not be an acceptable copy. And if you still keep on performing such thing, they will start treating you as a bad actor. Since it is a community, they will let community know that there are certain records coming out from this particular actor. How they will recognize you? There are a number of ways. One is IP, one is set of IPs, correct? And they will say that kindly do not accept any transaction which is coming from this particular set of IP. It seems to be a malicious actor. And that is how they safeguard it. We will talk more about it, why they do so, what is their incentive to do so. Again, Arpan, node is not only a copy of ledger, it is more than that. It is a copy of ledger as well as other aspects to it. Yeah, there are validation at various level. There are validation at every node level, at instead of various level, every node when writes a record, right, it is validated. So I think somebody has asked the question, one of the copies of node, does data in every copy of the same node changes? Yes, if everybody accept that that data is right, it is validated, it will change. Yeah, so if everybody tries to change the majority of the node, it will become wrong. And how this particular problem is solved, we will delve into it. We'll delve into it in today's session if time permits. So see how it is validated. There are many aspects to it. One aspect is there is every blockchain needs to follow the rules which is codified. So firstly, whatever transaction you have done should come under ambit of that particular rule, right? How you are writing it should come under ambit of that particular rule, correct? Other aspect is every node is able to identify an identity. So let's say if you go on a banking system and use your username and password, correct? It identifies, okay, this particular person is this particular person. Similarly, node have an inbuilt functionality to identify identities. Those are not directly related to username and password. We will delve about how identities happen in blockchain, but they are able to recognize identities. Supply chain sector, this question is a little bit out of context. We are currently talking about basics of blockchain. We can take it, probably I will take it end of the session. Just remind me again at the end of the session when we are closing, we will take this particular question. Anything related to node as such, what we have discussed, any counter arguments on it? Everybody understood public, private, and permission very clearly, right? What is public, what is private, and what is permission? Public, every node has same authority. Whatever is written on node is can be read by anybody, right? And nodes are accepting traffic from every node. They are broadcasting to every node. Private, it's a private network. Isolation happens in two-way. Software is delivered privately. It is not available in public domain. One way, other way, the system which on that particular software which is running only accepts traffic from certain whitelisted servers or IP. Correct? They do not accept traffic or broadcast traffic to everybody. So their inbound and outbound rules are totally governed and are only sending traffic to a particular systems or set of systems and receiving traffic from particular systems or set of systems. Permission, similar to private blockchain, but every node does not have same power. Every node does not have same authority. Different nodes have different roles and responsibility within the network. Majority is malicious. It is malicious, right? So one of the very underlying principle of blockchain is what majority says is correct in a public blockchain space, right? That is why enterprise do not use public blockchain space. So, but system has certain behavioral economics in place, which discourage majority to become malicious. It is like If majority becomes malicious, they are cutting their own hand, they are cutting their own feet. So if you build in behavioral economics, and if you build in certain incentive mechanism in such a fashion that when you do something wrong, it start harming you, and if a majority do something wrong, it start harming majority, it is not in their best interest to go forward with it. So it is not only the technology component. Blockchain has social, behavioral, economics encoded, which allows these systems to work. That is how the need of central party, need of central governance has been removed. It not in public blockchain space. There are concept of master nodes, these type of node in permission blockchain space, depending upon what type of permission blockchain is. So there are different kind of permission blockchain which follows different kind of technologies, which follows different types of role. So there can be these kind of technologies. What you are coming is more of a database point of view, where is master and a slave nodes. So it can exist in certain permission blockchain space, but not in a public blockchain space, not in a world of cryptocurrency or world of where tokens are given. Yes, sir. Preet has written correct, right word. Majority is the king. At most democratic system. So repetition of something we have discussed. Bitcoin is a public blockchain network. Anyone can add node in the network. Permission blockchain network have been created. These introduce rules controlling which node can be added and who can have account. I think everything here it's covered. We'll talk about identities. So we did talk about a lot of things: node, storage of data, storage of record, but all these things are irrelevant if there is no authenticated way to interact with them, right? Authentication is very much necessary in any system because it is very much required for validations. So by default, identities become a very much important part in a blockchain network or a distributed ledger system. Depending upon what type of network it is, similarly, identities are either very much open or very much closed and controlled. If you interact with any of the application, you will require to create an identity. If it is a banking, you go and create an identity which is backed by a KYC. So ultimately, there is a regulatory body which certifies that to the bank, this person is what he is speaking, this is what the name he goes by, and he is not impersonating. He is a right identity. Then when bank confirms it, bank creates an identity for you within their system so that you can interact with the banking system. Correct? Any differences here? What I'm trying to explain about identity? Okay. So similarly, if you talk about blockchain, now we do not have any central authority. When we are talking about public blockchain, there is no authority in place. Every node has same power. Correct? So how to create identities here? So that is where the concept of, okay, so let's talk firstly about why identities are needed. In any case, you need to have an account, because if there is a ledger entry in which you are transacting, so you require to have an account to actually go and do a transaction. In case of financial system, if you are seeing certain balances, it needs to be attributed to an account. These nodes themselves also needs to have an identity so that each and every node can understand each other, or they can understand that this is the identity or this is the node which is writing it. Correct? Because how they will understand that which node is writing which particular transaction. So who is writing and on whose behalf they are writing. So there are two aspects to it. So if you have a notebook and you are writing a record, then one thing is that one identity that who is writing that record, another identity is for whom that record is getting written. So crude example, in a Jamidari systems, you go to a Munib. Munib is somebody who is writing in the ledger. He is writing that record for you that you have borrowed this and this amount of money, or you are paying this and this amount of money. So there are two identities which are involved. One which identifies that, okay, who is the authority who is writing it and on whose behalf these records are written. So one becomes account on whose behalf these accounts or records are written, and node, since it is the node itself which is writing that record, right? It is not that you will go and write that record manually. It is the piece of software which is going to write that record, correct? After validation. So they also need to have a valid identity with them. And in case of a permission blockchain, it concept of identities becomes very much complicated, unconvoluted, because there is a lot of permissioning in place. So first, identity, what node can do what. So every node will have different permissions. So every identity created for every node will have different authorizations and or what they can do within the network. Then the participants or the people on whose behalf those records are written. Since it is permission to such a level that everybody cannot do everything, and that is what enterprise applications are. In case of any enterprise application, there are segregated roles and responsibilities that who can do what. So that becomes very much convoluted and very much complicated in comparison to a public blockchain. So in a private blockchain and a permission blockchain, identity becomes much more complicated and much more important. So any questions on why identities are needed? Any doubt? Okay, there are a few pending questions. What if user having copies of node run out of memory space to store data node? He will not be able to write it. He will require to buy new storage, right? So he will not be able to do anything with the incoming record. In which case we should use a private network, because in opinion blockchain success is based on being decentralized network, and that would be otherwise. It's not essential. I will tell you underlying reasons for it in last 5 to 10 minutes of the session. Why it makes enterprise blockchain makes use case. So not only about private, but why a permission blockchain is required, or why this is getting touted and this is getting used by enterprises. If it is only about decentralization in that particular way, in which perspective you are thinking, people should not be using blockchain for enterprises. It will get limited usage around cryptocurrency only, and it will not find any usage, or nobody will be using the technology at the rapid pace which is getting used. So I will let you know. Yeah, and in a simple word, identity is a role. No, identity is not a role. So how to define it? Let's say admin is a role, but there can be 10 people who are admin, right? So role are logical in nature, identities are physical in nature or materialistic in nature, if to be put as. I think I would how to better answer it. Best way to think is role is there will be a lot of application. There is admin role, right? But you can have n number of administrators. Many people can be given admin role. So the people are the identities. The people who are interacting with the system are identities. A role define what they can do within that particular system. So again, coming back to the point, as it is decentralized, it does not have a central authority. In normal world, base identities are issued by sovereign nation governments. It can be Aadhaar, it can be PAN, it can be voter ID. So there is a regulatory policy framework, there is a regulatory body which issues these identity to people, and that's how people get identified. What is their name, what is and whatsoever about their personal identifiable information. Since there are no such centralized authority in blockchain world, there is a concept which is known as sovereign identities or self-signed identities. So it may become very much counterintuitive for a few people. So try to understand this particular thing in a right context and in a right way. So self-sovereign identity is a way in which anybody can go and create a identity for themselves. Okay. So what it means that I can go and I can say that I need an identity and I will get one identity. And I do not need to go to any central authority. If I just know those blockchain rules and regulation, on what basis, under which algorithms the identities are recognized in blockchain world, I will get an identity. And in a very simplistic form, it is nothing but a public-private cryptographic key pair. People who do not understand cryptography word, do not worry about it. Just assume that you go to a software, right, which is available in a public domain, which is not controlled by anybody. You say, give me an identity. It gives you two set of things. One, it says that this is a private key. You should have it with yourself. You should not share it with anybody else. It is just you. You should be the whole sole owner of it, and you should keep it in a most secured way. And other key or identifier is say this is public. So whoever you want, you can let them know that this is my public thing, and whatever I am doing with my private key will be reflected in the network with this particular public key. To take some real life example in traditional world, which is not running on blockchain, your bank account number is a public identifier. Correct? When you go and create an account in a bank, you get an account number, or you get an identity which you give to public, that if you want to transfer some money, transfer it on this. And then your password through which you are taking login in an account and creating a transaction, right? It can be OTP, it can be transaction password, it can be a number of construct which we have. Those are analogous to private keys. So if you are creating any transaction, if you are preparing a record, you need to have private key to sign that record with. So once you sign that record with that particular private key and it goes onto the blockchain, and you have let everybody know that this is my public key, everybody will be able to identify you on a blockchain network that, okay, this particular person has done this particular transaction. In blockchain world, at a very crude, there is nothing else in form of identity. It is a very crude, it's a cryptographic key pair. People who understand cryptography, it is very good. Who does not understand cryptography, do little bit search about it, Google search about it, read about it. We will learn more about cryptographies and how these keys are created in hands-on exercises. probably in a third or probably in the end of second session or probably at the start of third session. But for today's session, just try to keep it very simple. There is a piece of software, you go, you ask them, give me a key. It gives you two things. One, it says that keep with yourself, do not share it with anybody. It should be continuously guarded with you, and give it the public key to everybody else who want to identify you. Underlying philosophy and principle is, if somebody has got that private key with himself, there is no, he becomes you. In blockchain world, whoever owns the private key, whoever has that particular private key is the owner. There are legalities, other legalities will come into picture, but from blockchain perspective, from blockchain network perspective, whoever has the key is the owner of account. Whoever has the key can sign those transactions. Whoever has the key has access to those value, has access to Bitcoin or Ethereum, or whatever he is signing with that particular key is getting recorded into the system with that particular identity. Every node is assigned an identity, correct? We did talk about there are two types of identity, account and node. So every node is also assigned an identity, because there are two things in blockchain. One is you create a transaction, but it is node which writes a transaction. In order to create a transaction, you may not require to have node with you, or you do not require to own a node. You can use anybody nodes, and you can say that this is a transaction I want to do, please write it. According to the blockchain rules and regulation, they will validate the transaction and they will write. Since they are writing it, there needs to be an identity associated to it to identify who has written this record, and the record gets written on somebody's behalf. So there are two identities, one identifies the node and one identifies the person. I do not understand what do you mean by change. Public and private key are always created in pair. So for a private key, there will be a public key. There is, since you have asked, I will tell you, but we will cover it in detail. So private key is with you. You give public key. Nobody can create that private key back from public key. It cannot happen that you change your private key and your public key will remain same. In a very crude form, in a very poor cryptographic algorithm, that is how it is. There are certain blockchains which have not in public blockchain, probably in private blockchain, or where our tokens are there. There are ways in which people are managing, especially exchanges and everything. There, since they manage identity themselves, they do not put everything on top of blockchain. There are certain data which are managed outside blockchain. There, those things can happen. But if your interaction is directly with blockchain, which is directly getting recorded in distributed ledger, those identities are present directly in distributed ledger, it is impossible. It is mathematically impossible. I will not say impossible. There is a reason I am saying mathematically impossible. And when we will do a more deep down around those things, I will explain it, why it is mathematical impossibility and a probabilistic impossibility. Okay, any other question?
There is one question from my side, Ajay, but might not be the right platform. So when we take about stable coins, right, they are pegged to, I'm speaking about USD Tether. So it is pegged to $1 and it is supposed to be $1 at any given point of time. Why is it 30 cents today?
So UST is an algorithmic stable coin, but why do you want to answer me here? Like, we are talking about basics of blockchain. I have today written one blog post, right? So I will write more about it. So
Sure.
it is, I do not know, right, everybody, how much people will understand. And so let's not confuse everybody.
Right.
Let's go with what currently we are.
Okay.
But it was an algorithmic stable coin, and everything people say it is decentralized, it doesn't mean it is decentralized, right?
Okay.
There are finer nuances and there are finer market elements. And in any case, cryptocurrencies were not created to be traded on an exchange, right? They were not created to peg them against dollar and you say this Bitcoin is this much dollar. They were created with the aspect of running parallel economic system where people are buying and selling in terms of Bitcoin and not converting them and selling them on exchange in terms of dollar. Only way to create Bitcoin was to mine. So that is why I do not want to go it, right? Then it will create, these things are for further session when we talk about miners and everything. So we will take those things, questions separately. Or probably I will put more details in Discord channel on why it has happened, how it has happened.
Okay.
Amit, what Mac was talking about was Terra USD, not Tether USD. So there is another stable coin which is known as UST, which was underlying to Luna token also, which has taken a very deep plunge. USDT is different from UST. There are two different stable coins. That is why I do not wanted to have such discussion. Everybody is not talking about cryptocurrency. So, but yeah, let's put our focus back on identities as account. So we were talking about, right, identities can be on node and identities can be on accounts. So I think I have already explained a lot about what does identities on account means and what it is used for. Any question, feel free to ask. Now, as I told you, right, that identity concept within a permission blockchain is little bit more muddled and more convoluted and more complex. In public blockchain, there is no centralized authority to give identity. Anybody can go and that is called self-sovereign identity. You can go and create identity for yourself to interact with the network. Why identity is required? If you do not have identity, you won't be able to interact with the network. If you want to have a node, then also you need to have an identity. If you want to have an account to propose a transaction, to do a transaction, or receive something so that you can finally materialize it, you need to have identities. In permission blockchain, since it is already permission, right? It is run by enterprises. There is a central authority which actually provision identities for people. Why? Because blockchain for enterprises are replacing their normal applications. So normal application means if there is an enterprise, that application will be used by his or organization employees. Now, each employee within an organization does not have same degree of roles and responsibility probably on the application or the platform that particular enterprise are using. So they cannot go forward with a concept of self-sovereign identity or a DID, which is self-sovereign identity is also touted as DID, distributed or decentralized identities. They cannot go ahead with such thing. So that is why the concept of authorized identities are there, where there is an authorization engine, where there is an authorization authorities, which go ahead and give identities to the people so that they can interact with the system, depending upon their roles and responsibility. So whatever is your roles and responsibility within the organization, accordingly, and identities are created for you. These are also certificate-based identities, but a lot of permission blockchain allows you to handle these certificate authorities in a number of ways. permission blockchain which has been developed are quite modular in nature. They can even replace identity system with enterprise existing identity system if they have their own certificate authority, or if they can replace it with Azure AD or any domain based authentication which they are using. They can even replace with their own SSO identities. So in case there is an organization which is using G Suite, or there is an organization which is using Office 365. So these permission blockchains allows them to use Office 365's identities also as an identities on the blockchain platform. A lot of innovation and a lot of development are going on these front, how to enable blockchain to use these authorized identities. So I will take a pause here for today's session. I will take certain pertinent questions which were important. I think we should answer those things about, since because I think today we are covering basics of blockchain. Instead of going more further, I think that things was missed during my earlier conversation, why enterprise are using blockchain even, correct? Because somebody told, right, it's not decentralized. And why even DLT Labs are building product for enterprises on top of blockchain. So that is what the perspective I will like to capture in next 5 minutes or so, and we will end this session sharp at 8. So, and if time I can take any session, I can take any question, I will try to answer it. Other, I will park all the crypto questions for the Discord channel. Any questions which are ahead of their time, ahead of this session, please your Discord channel, put in there. There are a lot of other people also with me who are working on that particular Discord channel, who are having competent knowledge, can answer your queries and questions. Try to be more collaborative on Discord. If you are not on Discord, Mac, can you do one thing? Can you, Mac and Swanpreet, can you send out Discord invite link in the chat window, as well as if you can send out DLT Labs social media channels and my social media channels to the chat so that we can be connected. Okay, so coming under the why business are looking for blockchain. Okay, when all we are talking about distributed decentralization. See, for any businesses or for any organization to succeed, what is the most fundamental and what is the basic thing which is required is collaboration. There are two types of collaboration. One which happens internally within an organization, and one collaboration which happens org to org, from one organization to another organization. If you are running any business, if any organization is running any kind of business, in order to succeed, they are required to collaborate with n different businesses. Correct? A successful business has an underpinning how much successful they are able to collaborate with other businesses. Now, any collaboration in current world is what? Sharing of information. Sharing of information is what? Sharing of data. Data is what? Distributed. Why it is distributed? Because every organization wants to have 100% uptime. They are not keeping only data in one geographical location or at one data center. Organizations have started using cloud so that high availability is there. Business people are able to access data when required, on demand, right? They are able to scale horizontally. There is no scalability issues. So by default, data have become distributed, and all these distributed data has certain core problem and core issues. Core issues around data integrity, data transparency, data privacy, data auditability. And I'm just putting these four. If we start putting down, the list will keep on going. But these are very four important problems. Blockchain natively solve these problems in most elegant fashion. Enterprises, in order to seamlessly interact with other businesses, have incorporated a lot of technologies in past and try to solve this problem, right? Everybody wants real-time access to data. right? And that's what all enterprises are working towards because they want to grow. Within the enterprises, a big conglomerate such as Walmart, there are a lot of departments. These departments are not able to seamlessly talk to each other because they maintain data in silos. They use different technologies now to interact with them to get data in real time. They have created a lot of facade. There are a lot of regulations, what can go where, what cannot go where. Everybody using different kind of software, different data layer, different presentation layer, correct? Different data governance rule. So it becomes very difficult. But blockchain solves these problems in very elegant fashion. So enterprises and we at DLT Labs started to think from that particular perspective that if we remove the public element or the cryptocurrency element from these native blockchain platform, right, and start building application on top of them, it is going to solve a lot of problems for enterprises. It will make their life easy. It will make their collaborations very effective. It will make their collaborations seamless. In businesses, nobody wants to have friction. If two organizations starts to have friction, their business is not going to succeed. They will start having friction because they are not able to converse with each other in real time. Their systems are not able to talk to each other in real time because there is problem of trust. Why there is problem of trust? Because with distributed data, there are issues around data transparency, data privacy, data integrity, data auditability. Each of these big organizations has a lot of compliances to follow. With so many department, breach happening at various, can happen at various layers, at various places. It becomes very difficult to capture it and to identify it. But with blockchain, these things get seamlessly integrated. These things get seamlessly identified. Because blockchain technology solves these problems and core issues in a native fashion. It does not create an facade layer. So when I say facade, let's take an example of banking transactions. So 20 years down the line, if I had to send money to somebody, I will go tell my bank, kindly do this. They will take the request. It will take few days for that transfer to happen. Correct. Now it is happening immediately. But is it happening natively? Is it happening at the very core? No. Banks have put in certain operational policies. RBI has put in certain operational policies, which is allowing, which makes it look like that each transaction has happened in real time, that immediately that value has got transferred. Because RBI has brought in certain middleman, RBI is acting as a middleman, as a centralized party, put those trust for those banks that when somebody is saying, putting these instruction, kindly if it is under these frameworks, under these limits, make it happen in real time, right? Make it happen. But at a very back end, the transfer happens in certain reconciliation process. Certain reconciliation happens from bank to bank where, okay, every bank tells the other bank, in totality, you owe us this. So let's transfer it and thus settle our account. So they solve this problem by creating a facade. Now, what problem arises by creating facades and not solving things natively? Especially for businesses which are growing or which are in a growth phase, right? There are a lot of business aspects which they have not thought in past, and there are a lot of new avenues to go forward. So as they start approaching new businesses, as they start onboarding new businesses, or as they start opening new arms or new revenue generation streams, it brings in a lot of complexity into the system, new complexity into the system. Due to these new complexities, whatever earlier facades were created, it starts to break down. The system starts to crash. System is not very much open-ended to solve new unforeseen problems which may come in future, because those issues have been not solved natively. Since blockchain solves these issues natively, technology allows businesses to be more open-ended, more innovative, and more area to explore.